Have you tasted that wonderful fat from the paw of the bear? What did it taste like? When did you taste something like that kept you warm all winter long? It could be stories like this. It could be something you found in nature. It could be something that you found in a book. It could be something you found in a relationship. It could be something you found in an animal. At its most profound, I hope it would be something that you would find as you dwell in the mind of Christ. Who knows? Long time ago, there was a huge forest. And in the forest, there were some tents. There were 3 tents. And in the first tent, there was an old man and an old woman. And in the second tent, there was their daughter who lived with her husband, who was a healer. But the third tent, which was a little far away from the other 2, was the youngest daughter. There's 2 girls. So this youngest daughter, it's strange to talk about her. It wasn't quite that she was beautiful, not in the traditional sense, but there was just something about her that was a little different. People were mystified by her. People always wanted more of her. So her parents, maybe as an act of protection, kept her squirreled away from the world. Time passes, and it's a kind of lonely life for the girl in that third tent. She looks out sometimes at the world and she wonders quite what's going on in it. Is there a world beyond the forest? And a kind of longing starts to grow in her heart to make mammal contact with something that isn't just the edges of the furs of the tent. Sometimes when she was very lonely, she would crawl in amongst the skins with her mum and dad, and sometimes they say an old woman would come and feed her, but that is about all we know. But there came a day, and she'd been sitting again, peering out at the tent, peering through the larch trees, and just longing for something to happen. I mean, do you remember being a teenager, just longing for something to happen? And something happened, all right. Something happened that maybe she wouldn't have necessarily visualized as an ideal response, but it's what happened. And what happened, first of all, was a sound. You know what it is, don't you? It's the enormous, great black bear. Not a grizzly, but a black bear. And the bear puts its head up through the furs of the tent, sees the young girl, feels the strange emanation of her longing, chucks her on his back, and elopes with her. Soon she is leaving the familiar. She's leaving her mum and dad, she's leaving her sister, she's leaving the healer, she's leaving the settlement. Further and further into the forest she goes. As she comes to a cave, they come to a cave. It's his cave, and it becomes clear it is the time of hibernation, because he's sort of stacking the entrance up with wood, timber, trees, leaves, the whole thing. And the 2 of them are making a little settlement inside. Now it's dark in there, but it's warm, and somehow the whole affair is not quite as terrifying as you may imagine. And she finds herself also suddenly very, very tired. You know how when someone yawns, it can be infectious. Well, the bear starts to yawn and she starts to yawn. And she can see that there's something almost kindly in his eyes. I don't want to humanize him too much, but there's something in there that suggests to her he's not about to gobble her up. And so the 2 of them fall asleep. She is perfectly warm. She's perfectly comfortable, and time passes. Now, I don't know, my friends, how well you sleep. With me, it's a bit up and down, But the kind of sleep she has for the first few weeks is the kind of sleep I could probably do with. I would be envious of it. It goes on and uninterrupted, and not too many weird dreams, just deep, nourishing slumber for the bones. But she wakes up and she's hungry. And by now, she has lost any fear she had left of the bear. And she does what you could regard as possibly a rather rash thing. She prods the bear awake. But the bear kind of gradually comes to himself, and she's gesturing that she's hungry, that she needs to be fed. Well, the bear doesn't break camp. He doesn't go out and try and find her something to eat. He does a very strange thing, kind of magical thing, kind of beautiful thing, actually. He brings his paw to her mouth, and from the center of the paw he gestures that she's to put her face against it, her mouth against it, and just from there, just from the center, pouring into her mouth is bear fat. Now, to you or I, in modernity, we may not think that fat is such a good thing, but I can assure you, in the cultures stories like this come from, fat is the stuff of life. You want as much of that blessed stuff as is possible. And so that is what happened for the rest of the winter. Every time she was hungry, she would jog the bear awake, and that bear fat would pour from the center of his paw, funnily enough, into her mouth, into her belly, keep her warm and keep her nourished. And we don't quite know the details, but as spring came along, it seemed that the young girl and the bear were married in some fashion. Well, spring means waking up, doesn't it? And so they moved all the underbrush aside, and there was the world, the radiant, lark-ascending, morning has broken world flooding in after their wonderful sleep together. And she's got a bit of extra weight on her, a bit of padding from all that bear fat. And what she wants now actually is, what she really wants is berries. She wants something else to taste. And so she goes out looking for berries, and he goes out and he's very proud to bring her meat. But she says to him, because in some way this was a time when bears and people, especially women, could communicate. She says, I'll go with you a long way, but I don't really want to be eating meat raw. You got to figure out how to cook it. You like the raw, I like the cooked. It's always been the way between human beings and the animal powers. We have to figure out a negotiation, a covenant. And so sure enough, he finds a way to make fire. And so Bear makes fire, and suddenly it turns out he's great at barbecue, and she's eating all this wonderful food. It's very keto. But she still really wants the berries. So she's out and she wanders quite far from camp looking for berries, and sure enough, she finds them. But as she finds them, she hears this sound. That is the sound of her brother-in-law, the healer. And he emerges from behind a strand of larch trees, and he says, I've been looking for you all winter. We're worried sick. Where have you been? And she says, well, I think I've married a bear. Women do this sometimes. And he said, yeah, I heard about this. I think it's a phase, And she said, well, he's looking after me very well. He doesn't seem to mean me any harm at all. I've been fed by bear fat from the center of his paw. It's quite a thing, I feel better than I have in a long time. And he's out there getting me meat. I'm collecting berries. Well, the healer says, I understand these passages in a man or a woman's life, but you're not meant to live full time with the animals. You have to come back. These things are finite in some way. You don't want to be in that cave for a second winter or a third winter or a fourth winter. It is a cherished, special thing, but something else has to happen. Now, tomorrow, I want you, if you want to come home, and I think you do, you'll be different. with whatever you bring, but I think you should come home. Tomorrow, when you go out looking for berries, stay out. And when you hear the sound of the bells, I will have met you where the berries are, and I will go and fight the bear. And I will distract the bear in our fighting, which will give you time to escape and get back to the tents. It may be in a while that you have to move the tents in case the bear comes along again, but that is what I am proposing. We don't know what was going on inside the young woman's heart at that moment. We don't know what the conflict was, but we could imagine that there was a little bit. There was some kind of life, strange though it was, that she was having with the bear. And now the healer had come, the shaman had come, the one who was lit up from the inside, as the event call it. So, next day, she goes out for berries again. They've had their lovely breakfast together. He fondly watches her leave. She makes her way for a few hundred yards more, a few hundred yards more, until she comes to where the berries were the day before. Sure enough, behind the trees is the brother-in-law, the healer. Now what he does is he leaps up in the air and he flips and he lands on his nose, lands on the top of his head and his nose. And as he does that, he changes into the shape of a bear. But the healer had a bell in his ear. He had a pierced ear with a bell in it. That was how people knew that he was a healer. And so the bear still has the bell. And he looks at her and he says, I'm going to create the distraction. Run, run, run. So she starts to run, doesn't she? And she's been running home for about 5 to 10 minutes when she hears this sound coming from the entrance of the cave. And she knows the two of them have got into it. Sometimes the sound of the bells is very loud, sometimes it is very faint, but she does not look left. She does not look right. She keeps going, she keeps going, she keeps going, she keeps going, until she bursts into the camp. She doesn't go back to her own tent. She doesn't go back to her mother and father's tent, but she bursts into her sister's tent where she knows if he has survived, the healer soon will come. Well, sometime later, the healer does come. And we don't know what happened in that fight. We don't know if there was a fatality. We don't know if it was merely a distraction. But what I can tell you is by this point, the young woman has fallen into a fever, a special medicinal healing type of fever. And for 2 days and for 2 nights, the healer worked on her with all the medicines and the plants and the herbs that he had at his disposal, until finally the fever dream passed and she came back to herself again. But she realized something was different. She realized, as I have said before, that a spark of light was growing in the croft of her hips. And 9 months later, she had a child, didn't she? Of course she had a child. And the child was just like any other child from the tribe she had grown up around. But for one thing, it had the ears of a bear. Every now and then, I take about 4 days out of my life and I just tell bear stories. People come, and from a Monday to a Friday, there'll be stories of women that have married or fallen in love with bears. And we get these stories all over the place. They exist in the Nordic tradition. They exist in the fairy tale tradition. They exist in the First Nations tradition. They exist in the folktale tradition. They exist in myths and stories from the Mediterranean. It's a thing. It's a thing. And that's the kind of story that my very own great uncle, who was a man called Hamer Broadbent, and Hamer Broadbent would have come across stories like this when he was traveling across places like Siberia and the Baltic states and Transylvania and Eastern Europe in general at the early part of the first part of the 20th century. He was a deep kind of Christian, and he tried to make himself helpful wherever he went, which meant he came not as an imposition, but as an invitation. He was a good man, Hamer Broadbent. You can read about him. There's books about him. And of course, his own book is the classic, The Pilgrim Church. But those are the kind of stories that he may have heard. That could have been the kind of story he would have heard from tribal people as he travelled. He was bitten by a wolf, but he made it. Anyway, that is another story. But telling that story to you today makes me thoughtful about that perennial hinterland between the raw and the cooked. That was what it was in the story, wasn't it? The raw and the cooked, between the village and the forest. These are essential themes of my work over the last 25 years or so. And so I'm thinking today, do you remember I always say don't tell the story what it is, but you can tell a story. You can think about what is most alive in it for you. And I would always suggest using the part of your mind that works and is orientated towards images rather than just ideas or concepts. I am very struck with the unusual beauty or the unusual qualities that the young woman has at the beginning of the story, and how longing sent out into the world, like echolocation, is going to cause some kind of response. And the response that comes, of course, is not in a domestic shape at all. Have you tasted that wonderful fat from the paw of the bear? What did it taste like? When did you taste something like that kept you warm all winter long? It could be stories like this. It could be something you found in nature. It could be something that you found in a book. Could be something you found in a relationship. Could be something you found in an animal. At its most profound, I hope it would be something that you would find as you dwell in the mind of Christ. Who knows? So what is your eccentricity, and how is it calling out to the world beyond the settlement? I'm always struck by the bell hanging. You get this in a lot of these stories, that when you are at that edge place between the animal powers and the human, it's not necessarily that one is to triumph over the others, but there is this strange relationship that exists when people lope over the hedge. It's the old business of shape-shifting, isn't it, that we get in so many of these stories. Think of the birth of Taliesin. And of course it ends with that extraordinary note that something grows in her from the experience. Something is always going to grow from these experiences. And it is a boy that is born, perfect in every way, like another boy from the settlement or the tribe, but with the ears of a bear. Something different. Now, what is that? That's for you to brood on. It's not for me to tell you. But I think that these stories, these very ancient stories, these stories with a little bit of the quality of Lascaux in them, to this day, they have a kind of vitality that talks about a love affair that has existed between us and the wider earth for thousands and thousands of years.
Down in yon forest there stands a hall, dice, I heard them ring. Covered all over with purple and pall. And I love my Lord Jesus so.